Welcome to the channel. Share where you're watching from. We'd love to find out, so drop a comment below, and let's jump into the story. Jason sat on the couch, trying to process what Madison had just told him, an entire month away on a business trip. It sounded serious. She explained that her manager had entrusted her with an important project, and she needed to oversee operations personally, far from home. Jason felt a mix of pride and unease. They hadn't spent that much time apart since tying the knot 5 years ago. They were a young couple, still renting a charming townhouse on the outskirts of Nashville, Tennessee. Although it wasn't their dream home, it was a cozy sanctuary for the two of them. Both Jason and Madison were ambitious and driven, working hard to save for the down payment on a house they could call their own. Even with their demanding schedules, they prioritized quality time together, which had always been the foundation of their strong connection. But lately, Jason had noticed something different about Madison. She seemed laser-focused on her career, taking on late nights and volunteering for extra projects. "What's with the sudden hustle?" Jason asked her one evening, half joking. Madison raised an eyebrow and smirked. "Because I'm going to beat you to it," she teased. "Remember? First one to hit 6 figures wins." Jason laughed, brushing it off as playful banter. But now, watching her pack her suitcase with an intensity he hadn't seen before, he couldn't help but wonder if there was more truth in her words than he had realized. Madison had always been ambitious, but this time, her determination felt different. She spoke enthusiastically about the praise she'd received from her boss, the significant responsibilities she'd taken on, and her desire to climb to the next level. Jason felt a swell of admiration. He was proud of her dedication. As she carefully folded clothes into her suitcase, Jason teased, "I'll be waiting for those CEO-sized paychecks soon, Mrs. Overachiever." Madison rolled her eyes with a laugh. "Oh, you just wait. When I get back, you'll be bragging about your wife winning Employee of the Year," she replied with confidence. Her playful humor and self-assuredness reassured him, at least temporarily. Madison hugged Jason tightly, and for a moment, he felt a renewed sense of trust in their relationship. Everything would work out, or so he hoped. The morning of Madison's departure was bittersweet for Jason. She had meticulously packed her suitcase, double-checking her passport, itinerary, and essentials. As she zipped her luggage shut, Jason leaned against the doorway, watching her with a mixture of admiration and unease. "Los Angeles, huh?" he said with a wistful smile. "A whole month there. That's big." Madison looked up at him, her eyes sparkling. "It's not a vacation, Jason. I'll barely have time to breathe between meetings, let alone explore the city." Still, the thought of her being in a vibrant, sprawling metropolis without him stung a little. Visiting Los Angeles had been one of their shared dreams, but life and finances had never quite aligned for them to take the trip together. "Well, I hope you managed to sneak in some time to see the sights," Jason said, keeping his tone light. Madison smiled as she walked over, brushing her hand against his cheek. "I'll bring you back something. Maybe a little piece of Hollywood," she joked. At the front door, they shared a lingering hug. "Good luck with everything," Jason said warmly. "Thanks," she replied softly. "I love you." "I love you too," Jason said, squeezing her hand as she grabbed her bags and walked to the waiting rideshare car. The first week without Madison passed uneventfully. Jason settled into a quiet routine, exchanging texts with her throughout the day. Madison kept him updated about her work, mentioning how hectic her schedule was and how little downtime she had. While her messages were reassuring, Jason couldn't help but notice the emptiness of their townhouse without her. By the weekend, the silence started to weigh on him. Determined to break the monotony, Jason decided to tackle a large grocery run. With Madison gone, the fridge was nearly empty, and he figured restocking would help distract him. He drove to Summit Market, a popular supermarket on the other side of town. As Jason wandered through the aisles, checking items off his list, he found his thoughts drifting back to the long, quiet evenings in their townhouse. Turning into the coffee aisle, Jason heard a voice call out behind him. "Jason? Oh my gosh, is that you?" Startled, he turned and saw Rebecca, an old college friend he hadn't seen in years. She still had the same vibrant energy and friendly smile he remembered. "Rebecca. Wow, it's been ages," Jason said, returning her smile as they exchanged a quick hug. "How have you been?" "Great. I just got back from Chicago." "Funny running into you here," Rebecca said, tilting her head. "Wait, are you already back?" Jason frowned, caught off guard. "Back? From where?" Rebecca gave him a puzzled look. "Chicago. I ran into Madison a few days ago." "She was with a guy. She mentioned you were there with friends too." Jason's stomach dropped. He forced a chuckle, masking his confusion. "Oh, right. Yeah, work's been non-stop since we got back." Rebecca smiled sympathetically. "Well, don't overdo it. It was great seeing you." As Rebecca walked away, Jason stood frozen, his mind racing. Madison was supposed to be in Los Angeles. How could Rebecca have seen her in Chicago, with another man? The rest of the weekend passed in a haze for Jason. Rebecca's words echoed in his mind, growing louder with every passing hour. Madison had assured him she was in Los Angeles, immersed in meetings and deadlines. Yet Rebecca, someone Jason trusted, claimed to have seen her in Chicago, and not alone. At first, Jason tried to rationalize it. Maybe Rebecca had mistaken someone else for Madison. Maybe Madison had a layover in Chicago for work. But as the doubts piled up, the excuses felt increasingly hollow. By Monday morning, Jason couldn't take it anymore. He needed answers. Instead of calling Madison directly, he decided to contact her office. If she wasn't where she said she was, he needed to know for sure. His hands trembled as he dialed the number for Zenith Dynamics, Madison's company. The receptionist answered cheerfully. "Good morning, Zenith Dynamics. How can I assist you?" Jason deepened his voice, trying to sound casual. "Hi, this is Adam Carter. I used to work with Madison. We've lost touch, and I was hoping to reconnect. Could you transfer me to her line?" There was a brief pause. "Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Carter. Madison is currently on leave. She'll be back in about 3 weeks." Jason's heart sank. "Oh," he said, struggling to keep his voice steady. "I didn't realize. Is everything okay?" "Yes," the receptionist replied warmly. She mentioned her husband had a back injury, and she's taking time off to help him recover. "It's really thoughtful of her." Jason froze. His mind reeled as the pieces began to fall into place. Madison wasn't in Los Angeles. She wasn't even working. She had told her office he was injured and needed her at home. The elaborate lie was perfectly crafted, but Jason was living proof it wasn't true. "Thank you," he managed to say before hanging up abruptly. He sat back in his chair, his thoughts swirling. Madison had woven an entire story to cover her tracks. Rebecca's comment about Chicago, the fake business trip, and now the lie to her office, it all pointed to the same conclusion: Madison was with someone else. Jason felt a surge of anger and heartbreak. Madison had betrayed him and crafted a web of lies to hide it. His first instinct was to call her immediately and demand an explanation. But he hesitated. A confrontation without proof would only lead to more lies and excuses. Madison was clever, she'd find a way to twist the situation. He needed a plan. By the afternoon, Jason had made up his mind. He called a divorce attorney. After a quick online search, he found Mark Elliott, a highly rated lawyer specializing in cases involving marital infidelity. Within hours, Jason was sitting across from him in a sleek downtown office. Mark, a composed man in his early 50s with a measured tone, listened intently as Jason laid out the story: Madison's supposed trip to Los Angeles, Rebecca's revelation, and the fake story she had told her office. When Jason finished, Mark leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen thoughtfully against his notepad. "You have a couple of options," he began. "First, you could confront her directly, but without solid proof, it's her word against yours. She might manipulate the situation or deny everything outright." Jason nodded, already suspecting that wouldn't work. "And the other option?" Mark leaned forward. "We gather evidence. If you want to protect your finances, especially your shared savings for a house, we need to act quickly. That money could be at risk if she's as calculated as you suspect." Jason felt a surge of determination. "I'm not letting her take what we've worked so hard for," he said firmly. Mark nodded. "Good. Here's what we'll do. First, we'll secure your finances. Then, we'll quietly begin building a case. The stronger your evidence, the better your position will be." Over the next few days, Jason worked closely with Mark to safeguard their shared savings. Following Mark's instructions, Jason opened a new account and discreetly transferred the funds they had been saving for a house. Every step was carefully documented to ensure it was legal and above board. Each transaction felt like both a victory and a heartbreak. Securing the money meant reclaiming some control, but it also underscored the betrayal that had unraveled their marriage. By the end of the week, the finances were secure, and Mark had prepared the divorce papers. All that remained was waiting for Madison to return. Jason spent the weekend replaying everything in his mind, torn between his anger and sadness. But his resolve grew stronger with each passing day. He was ready to confront the truth head-on. When Madison's rideshare car pulled into the driveway late Sunday afternoon, Jason stood by the window, watching. She stepped out, her skin glowing with a faint tan and her spirits visibly high. She looked refreshed, as though her business trip had been anything but stressful. Jason noticed she carried a shopping bag from an upscale boutique, something she would never have splurged on without a reason. His suspicions hardened into certainty. As Madison approached the door, Jason opened it before she could unlock it. She froze momentarily, startled by his expression, but quickly recovered, flashing him her usual warm smile. "Hey, babe," she said cheerfully, leaning in for a kiss. Jason stepped back, his gaze steady. "Welcome home," he said, his voice calm but cold. Madison tilted her head, sensing the tension. "What's wrong? You look upset." Jason crossed his arms. "How was Los Angeles?" he asked, his tone deliberate. Madison hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "It was exhausting," she replied, forcing a laugh. "Back-to-back meetings, late nights, it was a lot." Jason nodded slowly. "Must have been. You know, I ran into Rebecca at Summit Market last week. She mentioned seeing you in Chicago." Madison's face went pale. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Jason pressed on. "And then I called your office. Imagine my surprise when I learned you weren't in Los Angeles. In fact, they think you've been here with me, helping me recover from some imaginary back injury." Madison stammered, "Jason, I can explain." "Don't bother," Jason interrupted, his voice cutting through her excuses. "I know about Chicago. I know everything." Her facade cracked, and she stepped back, her confidence replaced by panic. "Jason, please, just let me explain. It's not what you think." Jason held up a hand to stop her. "Save it, Madison. I've already spoken to a lawyer. There's a folder with divorce papers in the car, waiting for you. I think it's time we both move on." Madison's eyes filled with tears. "Jason, don't do this. Please. We can fix this." Jason shook his head, his expression resolute. "You've already made your choices, Madison. Now it's my turn. Madison stood frozen on the doorstep, clutching her shopping bag as Jason's words sank in. She blinked back tears, struggling to find the right words. "Jason, please," she said, her voice cracking. "It was a mistake, a stupid mistake. I was overwhelmed, and I didn't know how to tell you." Jason's face hardened. "A mistake? You planned an entire trip, lied to your office, and made me believe you were halfway across the country. That's not a mistake, Madison. That's a betrayal." She reached out, but Jason stepped back, his arms crossed tightly. "Let me make this right," she pleaded. "We can go to therapy, we can." "It's too late," Jason cut her off. "I've already moved the savings into my account. You won't be using it to fund your lies." Madison's jaw dropped. "You moved the money." "Jason, you can't do that." "Oh, I can." "And I did," he replied firmly. "Mark Elliott, my lawyer, made sure it was all legal. That money was for our future, and you threw that future away." Madison's composure crumbled, and she started sobbing. Jason didn't flinch. He had spent weeks preparing for this moment, and he wasn't going to let her manipulate him again. "Your things are in the garage," Jason said, his tone cold but steady. "Take them and go." Madison's sobs turned to shaky breaths. "And where am I supposed to go, Jason?" she asked, her voice trembling. "That's not my problem anymore," Jason replied. "I gave you everything, my trust, my love, our future. And you threw it away for what? A fling?" Madison didn't answer. She turned and walked to the garage, where she found her belongings packed neatly into boxes. Jason had even included a handwritten note taped to one box: "This is the life you left behind." As she loaded the boxes into her car, Madison spotted the folder on the passenger seat, just as Jason had said. The bold letters on the front read "Divorce Papers." Her hands trembled as she picked it up, flipping through the pages. Each signature line felt like a nail in the coffin of their life together. The next day, Jason met with Mark to finalize the paperwork. The lawyer commended him on how smoothly he had handled the situation. "You're in a strong position," Mark said. "The financial safeguards are in place, and her actions speak for themselves. This should be straightforward." Jason nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and sadness. "I just want it to be over." Mark placed a reassuring hand on the folder of documents. "It will be." Later that evening, Jason decided he needed a distraction. He called up some old friends from college and arranged to meet at the Copper Lantern, a casual bar in downtown Nashville they used to frequent. It was the first time in weeks he felt a spark of excitement. At the bar, Jason found himself laughing and swapping stories with his friends, feeling a sense of freedom he hadn't experienced in years. But then, midway through the evening, one of his friends, Ethan, mentioned something that made Jason freeze. "You'll never believe who I ran into last month in Chicago," Ethan said, sipping his drink. "Ryan Blake. Remember that guy from freshman year? Turns out, he was on this big romantic getaway with someone. I didn't get her name, but it sounded intense." Jason's stomach turned. "Ryan Blake?" he asked, his voice tight. "What do you mean by romantic getaway?" Ethan shrugged. "He was bragging about some whirlwind weekend in Chicago with this girl he met. Said she was married but on the rocks. Didn't go into much detail." Jason clenched his fists under the table. The pieces of the puzzle finally fit together. Ryan, a cocky acquaintance from college, had always been a troublemaker. It was no coincidence that he had been in Chicago the same time Madison was. Jason didn't say much for the rest of the night. But as soon as he got home, he pulled out his phone and searched Ryan Blake on social media. His profile was private, but one recent photo caught Jason's eye, a picture of Ryan holding a cocktail with the caption, "Weekend Bliss in Chicago Night with Stars Cocktail Glass." Jason's jaw tightened. He needed to confront this head-on. Jason stared at the photo for a long moment, his mind racing. The caption wasn't definitive proof, but it was enough to push him into action. He saved the image and drafted a quick text to Mark Elliott, attaching the photo. "Jason, I think I found something. Can we use this?" Mark responded within minutes. "Mark, it's a start. We need more solid evidence, though. If you can get direct proof that ties him to Madison, it'll strengthen your case." Jason nodded to himself, determined. He spent the next few hours scrolling through Ryan's online presence, combing for anything that might connect him to Madison. It was tedious, but he wasn't giving up. The next morning, Jason decided to take it a step further. He contacted a private investigator. If Ryan and Madison had been together in Chicago, there had to be a trail, receipts, photos, something. Within 24 hours, the investigator delivered. A series of photos landed in Jason's inbox, each one more damning than the last: Ryan and Madison dining at a trendy Chicago restaurant, walking hand in hand through Millennium Park, and even sharing a kiss outside a luxury hotel. Jason's stomach churned as he clicked through the images. The betrayal was now undeniable. By the time Madison received the divorce papers, Jason had already filed them. She showed up at the townhouse unannounced the next evening, her face pale and her eyes red-rimmed from crying. "Jason, we need to talk," she said, her voice cracking. Jason opened the door just enough to face her. "There's nothing left to say, Madison. Please," she begged. "I made a mistake, a horrible mistake. I wasn't thinking. But I love you, Jason. I want to fix this." Jason shook his head, his expression resolute. "You love me. You have a funny way of showing it. Was it love when you lied to my face about Los Angeles? Was it love when you spent our savings on a getaway with Ryan?" Madison flinched at the mention of Ryan's name. "It wasn't like that," she stammered. "I didn't mean for it to happen." Jason's voice was calm, but his words were sharp. "You didn't mean for it to happen. You planned it, Madison. You lied to me, to your office, to everyone." Madison started crying, but Jason didn't waver. "It's over," he said firmly. "The papers are filed. I'll let my lawyer handle the rest." Before she could respond, Jason closed the door, leaving her standing on the porch, tears streaming down her face. The following week, the court hearing was swift. Armed with the investigators' photos and a detailed timeline of Madison's lies, Jason's case was rock solid. Mark presented the evidence methodically, leaving no room for rebuttal. Madison, visibly distraught, tried to plead her case, painting herself as a woman who had made a mistake and wanted to make amends. But the evidence was too damning, and the court wasn't sympathetic. Jason retained the majority of their shared savings and was granted the townhouse lease, which he planned to terminate. Madison was left with little leverage, her actions having effectively destroyed her case. That evening, Jason decided to close this chapter of his life on a lighter note. He met Ethan and a few other friends at Blue Flame Tavern, a new spot downtown. It was a sleek, modern bar with great music and an easygoing vibe. As the group reminisced and laughed, Jason felt a weight lifting off his shoulders. For the first time in months, he felt free. Toward the end of the night, a woman approached their table. She introduced herself as Natalie, a friend of one of Ethan's coworkers. Her warm smile and genuine interest in the conversation caught Jason off guard. They started chatting, and to his surprise, the conversation flowed effortlessly. Natalie shared her passion for art and travel, mentioning her plans to visit Nashville's local galleries. Jason found himself smiling more than he had in weeks. As the night wound down, Natalie scribbled her number on a napkin and slid it across the table. "Call me sometime. Maybe we can check out that gallery together," she said with a smile. Jason tucked the napkin into his pocket, feeling a spark of hope for the first time since his marriage had unraveled. Meanwhile, Madison tried to piece her life back together, but the fallout was unavoidable. Ryan quickly distanced himself once the affair became public knowledge. Friends who had once admired Madison turned cold, unwilling to condone her betrayal. Her once promising career stalled, as whispers of her personal life seeped into her professional circles. Jason, however, embraced the fresh start. He found solace in the simple things, redecorating his new apartment, reconnecting with old friends, and exploring interests he had set aside during his marriage. One quiet evening, as he sat on his new balcony overlooking the Nashville skyline, Jason took a deep breath. For the first time in a long while, he felt at peace. The future was his, and he was ready to shape it on his own terms.